Hi, my name is Kira, and this is Chapter 9 of Boxcar to Nowhere, the last chapter. Chapter 9. You can run, but you can't hide. There was a gentle morning breeze coming in the partially open window, along with ample sunlight in the distance, where nearly continuous sounds of earth being worked on by large tractors. Hope opened her eyes slightly, still not aware of her present location. But the bed was warm and soft, and the colors in the room enchanting in the speckled light of morning. Some weight was being applied to the side of the bed, and she laughed before reaching out to pet his big head. Jazzy, you wonderful big loyal dog of mine. She looked toward that side and saw a familiar sight. He had placed his head far enough on the bed that his nose was lying against her arm. The love in his eyes impacted her more forcefully than usual. She noticed the gray whiskers on his chin, a sign that Jazzy was heading toward his later years, and would probably not be there when she finally reached adulthood. What a gift it was to have him around when she needed him the most. "Ready for breakfast, Jazzy?" she asked, and received a small bark in return. She was sure he understood her words, not just their meaning. After breakfast, again, she helped with the dishes and talked almost continuously with Maybelle, who quickly was becoming something between a friend and a mother in her heart. Hope wished that these two wonderful people could be relatives of hers, whom she could visit with from time to time. "Hope," Maybelle began, "your father isn't due to arrive for at least 2 hours." She paused, thinking out her request. Hope was looking at her, waiting on the second part. "Would you walk with me up the road a bit this morning? I have to pick up some produce from a neighbor, and I'm sure you would like meeting that family." Hope nodded a yes, but felt that there was more to the story and didn't look away. "And they have a son about your age." Maybelle finally disclosed what the trip was really about. "Oh," she continued after a thoughtful pause, "and he is rather good-looking himself." Maybelle looked a bit shy after telling the whole story, and she looked out the window, while expecting some reply from Hope. "I never mind meeting good-looking boys. We can go any time you say," Hope replied. It was only about half a mile between houses, but these neighbors were full-time farmers, not a railroad family, and their farm was very alive with activity. As the three got closer, the sound of farm machinery grew even louder. There was a bit of dust in the air created by a big tractor tilling up the soil in the distance. Hope became aware that there was something happening to Jazzy, and she started watching him instead of concentrating on the views. Jazzy had moved up somewhat ahead of them. His head was up, and he was sniffing the air. His head moved back and forth as if he had become interested in what was around and ahead of him. Hope reached down and stroked his back, but he ignored her, never looking back as he usually did. Something was up, and it was obvious that Jazzy was detecting some interesting scents. Hope started to grow agitated, considering what it could mean. "Maybelle, can you tell me who works at this farm we are heading toward?" Hope asked. "Well, it's a family farm, so the entire family works there. But in active periods of farming, they will occasionally hire an additional man or two. Is that what you wanted to know?" "It's what I expected to hear. Maybelle, I've got to tell you something before we get there," Hope said with a near whisper. Maybelle stopped walking and turned to face her, starting to dread hearing whatever Hope was going to say. Back home, Jazzy and the policemen were trying to catch an escaped convict named Jerome Tate. He got away, and I'm pretty sure he was the one that locked us in the boxcar, and I think he tried to open the overhead hatch that night. Watching Jazzy, I'm starting to think that Tate came this way recently. Maybelle's hand came up to her mouth, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Why in the world would this man want to do you harm, Hope?" she asked. "Because Jazzy knows his scent and can track him down. That's why he's afraid of this dog." We should go back and call Jack. He will know what to do, Mabel said. It's too late for that. Look at Jazzy. He is already tracking Tate's scent, and I don't think he will turn around now. We have to go where he goes, because I don't want to go back without him, and neither do you, Hope explained, and could see that Mabel was nodding in agreement. They would be unprotected back home without Jazzy. As the three continued to walk toward the farm, they began to see individuals moving about, doing their various jobs. It was still too far away to make out faces, but Hope was concentrating, trying to be alert and recognize Tate before they were spotted by him. Jazzy stopped moving forward and gave Hope a prolonged stare. He was trying to tell her something. What he wanted suddenly became obvious. He wanted the leash unclipped. Hope briefly wondered if there was some telepathy at play. Could Jazzy actually be that intelligent? Hope bent down and unclipped him. Jazzy continued to focus on the farm, watching the men moving around and frequently sniffing the air. Abruptly, Jazzy moved off the road to be alongside a tall growth of corn, completely out of view of the farm and anyone watching. He continued forward, often looking back toward Hope as a signal to follow him. It dawned on Hope what Jazzy's plan was all about. In her fresh white sweater, accompanied by a big dog, they would instantly be spotted by Tate, giving him the advantage. This way, they would get much closer before Tate became alarmed. Is that dog doing what I think he's doing? Mabel wondered, taking it all in. Amazing, isn't he? Hope agreed. There's only one word for that dog, Mabel said with clarity. Predator. Tate was there all right, and he was watching the two women advance toward the farm. He noticed the girl in the white sweater and looked at her for a moment or two, wondering if she was familiar or not. The key ingredient was a big dark dog. This girl had no dog, and the dog was the one who could be dangerous, and the one who could positively identify him. He reflexively patted his pocket containing the gun, assuring himself that it was still there. Then he went back to his work. The entrance to the farm was just ahead and about even with the rows of nearly mature corn stalks. Hope glanced toward Jazzy just in time to see him disappearing into a row only 2 deep from the front edge of the tall stalks. She cast her eyes about, looking at each man in view. One stood out, and the more she looked, the more her memory brought back the moment she was framed in the door of the boxcar. He was Tate, for sure. And he was the reason Jazzy had become invisible. Tate stopped working to get a better look at the two women heading toward the farm. One was older, and he was sure he had never before encountered her. But the other one, the younger blonde wearing a white sweater, raised his eyebrows. She was starting to trigger a memory, though he only got a glance at her in a dark corner before he shut the door. It could be. What Tate was not watching was the row of corn stalks only 100 feet away. In between the stalks was the dark head of a big dog, waiting on the perfect moment to close the distance as quickly as possible. His muscles tensed, his body crouched low, and his eyes focused on his target. It takes a fast, trained, and conditioned human about 10 seconds to cover 100 meters, traveling at around 14 miles an hour. A muscular dog will take under half that time. Even if you are already looking his way, it could take some time to react to a charge. But seeing him come at you out of your peripheral vision, and so Tate saw him coming only for 2 seconds before he arrived. There was no barking or growling, giving any warning. Not enough time to do anything but scream. Well, he could. Hope and Mabel arrived at the moment Tate started screaming. The others present at first looked up in surprise, then started running in different directions and for different reasons. Hope could see Tate's feet and Jazzy standing over him, waiting on his next movement. She called, "Come, Jazzy!" And when that had no effect, she ordered, "Jazzy, foos!" Also with no effect. There was a pistol lying on the ground near Tate's feet, but Hope didn't want to get that close. Behind her, she could hear Mabel loudly trying to explain what just happened. "Yes," Mabel said. "Call the police, but leave the dog alone. He may have just saved your lives." Hope couldn't hear the answer, but the angry voices she understood. And she realized that these folks had no idea of whom they had hired, or why Jazzy had attacked the man so suddenly. Sergeant Barrows happened to arrive just before the police cruiser from the opposite direction started pulling in. There were two groups of people present. 3 men were standing together watching Jazzy, and the other group was talking to Hope and an older woman. Barrows pulled on his police hat and pinned his badge to his shirt before getting out of the car. He made his way toward Hope first, and as soon as she saw him, she was in his arms, tears wetting her face. "What happened, Hope?" Pop asked, smoothing her hair away from her face. "Jazzy got him, Pop. He's lying down over there, and Jazzy won't come away. Everybody here is afraid that Jazzy will attack them also." "No, he won't attack anybody. Come with me and we'll get him away from harm." They walked toward Jazzy, who was watching them intently, but still glancing back to the man on the ground. Sergeant Barrows got close enough to see that Tate's eyes were open, but also saw the wounds on both arms. "Tate, you are under arrest. Do not move, understand?" He turned to Jazzy and patted his head. "Good job, my friend. Good job. You can go to Hope now. You are done here." Jazzy didn't hesitate. Without a backwards look, he trotted over to Hope and placed his head affectionately against her leg, looking up to her with adoration in his eyes. The end.